Hello everyone, my name is Phawx. In this video, we're going to be doing a technical quick look of the new Lenovo Legion Go. This is the retail version. I actually bought this from Best Buy. Shout out to Best Buy, by the way. They shipped this to me. The launch date for this was the 31st, and I got it on the 31st at noon. So amazingly great support by Best Buy from the company there with the whole logistics that they're doing there. Doing a great job. So thank you to Best Buy for getting this so quickly so that I've been able to review this faster. But along those lines, since this is a retail unit, I can confirm, unfortunately, that it is a portrait native panel that is on here. So it's kind of unfortunate seeing Lenovo use a portrait-based panel on a PC gaming handheld. Well, they are a very large manufacturer, so I was really hoping that they would have done better here. So it remains that only the Asus ROG Ally actually has a native landscape panel. It's also an EDP panel that has VRR, whereas this is most likely MIPI and does not feature VRR, even though it is a sensationally large 8.8-inch QHD display. So that's 2560 by 1600, 2560 by 1600. It's 10 by 16 by 10 aspect ratio. So a very large display. Size comparison-wise, the Asus ROG Ally is considerably smaller. It'll come up basically to one Joy-Con less on this device. Roughly speaking, the Lenovo Legion Go is sort of similar in dimensions to the Steam Deck, but the Steam Deck has a little bit better ergonomics. Overall, I'm still fine with this. This type of device is very much function over form, and that, to be honest, is me. So I like a lot of the things that they did here, and we're going to talk about a bunch of those things. First, let's just quickly talk about the specs. There's two different versions that you can get. There's a $700 model and a $750 model. So this one is the $700 model. It's 512 gig SSD installed. For $50 more, you can do 1 terabyte. So it is pretty much a no-brainer at that point just to spend $750 and get the 1 terabyte model. I think that a lot of people would find that to be more than fair. In this particular unit, both of those units are going to be the Z1E, AMD Z1E. It's a offshoot of their 7840U. This is a very, very performant APU. It's the best performant APU that we have. There are some caveats here, along with other additional tech specs on here. The one thing that is nicer on this particular unit over the Asus ROG Ally is that we have LPDDR5X 7500 mega transfer RAM, whereas the Asus ROG Ally is 6400 mega transfers. And I can confirm that it does actually go up to there because you can actually clearly see that it's 937 megahertz. This being, when you equate it out, it's 7500 mega transfers. 6400 mega transfers would be 800 megahertz on RAM frequency, so we are confirming that we do have that fast speed of RAM. We need that RAM to feed the GPU, so we're going to be doing a full performance comparison between the Asus ROG Ally and the Lenovo Legion Go and some other devices, but that's going to be on a later video. That's going to be a more in-depth video. This is a technical quick look. We're going to be doing some quick benchmarks because there are some different performance modes, and I want to give you a quick look of that on a CPU-bound synthetic test. And we're going to compare that on a few different things. We'll touch base on that in a second. So basically, that's it. 512 or 1 terabyte SSD, the AMD Z1E in both platforms, 7500 mega transfers RAM, 16 gigabytes of it, and that's pretty much it. The 8.8-inch 2560 by 1600 screen, which is unfortunately native portrait, and no VRR, but it is 144 hertz. Just want to interrupt real quick. I forgot to mention this while I was going through that little spiel, is that both of the USB-C ports are USB-C 4. So they actually do support the PCIe tunneling. So you can get Thunderbolt type of support, eGPU Thunderbolt support on both of these ports if you wanted to. So I've already confirmed this using the GPDG1. I plugged it into the bottom port and it came up through the GPU-Z, and I plugged it into the top port and it came up through GPU-Z. There is one caveat here, a word of warning. Warning might be a little bit tough here, but you have to remember that the Lenovo Legion Go is using the Z1E. So by that, the Z1E does not have access to the latest AMD Adrenalin drivers. So if you're going to use an AMD-based eGPU solution via Thunderbolt, you're going to have a bit of a bad time because when you install the latest AMD drivers, you're going to knock out the Z1E drivers that are for this. So when you unplug it, you'll no longer have drivers for your device in a handheld state, so you have to go ahead and install those back with the Lenovo drivers to get that up and running. So that's the only kind of problem that we have with using AMD eGPU solutions through Thunderbolt. So I really wouldn't recommend AMD Thunderbolt solutions for this. Instead, I would very much recommend any NVIDIA solution. So put any NVIDIA card into an eGPU and you'll be just fine. The NVIDIA portion will have its own drivers and they can run cooperatively. There's not going to be a problem. You disconnect, it'll go back to the AMD Z1E Lenovo drivers, no problem. Anyway, back to the video. I am going to briefly talk about the problems with having a portrait-based screen for PC gaming handles, especially on Windows, not so much on Linux, because Linux is already going to wrap a lot of those games. So viewing it through the lens of a Windows PC gaming handheld, having native portrait is unfortunate for a lot of reasons. We're going to go through a small slice of that in a moment. Up first, I want to just quickly take a look at performance benchmarks. Now, this is synthetic benchmarks that we're going to be taking a look at here. So I'm going to bring that up on the screen right now. All right, let's understand what's going on in these benchmarks. This particular synthetic benchmark I'm using is Heaven, and the type of constraint that I'm putting it into is a CPU-bound test. This is per watt that we're looking at, and we have 4 different tests that are here. First, we have what the Steam Deck is doing per watt on this graph, and you can see that the Steam Deck is clearly blowing out the competition. This has been known for a while that the Steam Deck is very, very performant at lower TDPs, but obviously ends at 15 watt and has massive diminishing returns after 11 and 12 watt anyway. So you can see where that arc is right there, that the Steam Deck gets a lot of its performance really around the 10 and 11 watt mark. So that's the Steam Deck. And then if we look at the red, yellow, and blue lines, those are all the Lenovo Legion Go. Now I want to explain something right here. In the Legion Space app itself, right here you can see that there are 2 different, let me go over here. There are actually two different modes of power, so 6 different options. You have thermal mode with is quiet, balance, performance, and then custom. Custom is another thing, but you can actually just specify the wattage. All of these tests that you're seeing right now on this benchmark are all in the thermal mode of balance, which is effectively a 20 watt TDP cap, regardless of Ryzen Adjust or any other software solution that you're going to try and push extra wattage to it. Then there's the OS power modes. And those are what you're seeing here. So you're looking at performance, balance, and efficiency. Now, you're looking at this and you can see that the Legion Go efficiency power schema, the yellow line, is the most performant per watt along this entire graph. It is getting the best performance out of all of them over performance and balance. And you may be asking yourself, well, why is that? That seems odd. It's actually correct. And this is something, if you've been following my channel for a while, this should be noticeable to you. And you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. For anyone that's new to this will seem odd. It seems counterintuitive. But you have to remember there are 2 things that are going on. Number one, we are in a power-constrained device. This Z1E, the 7840U, all of these types of devices, when we take a look at the CPU component and the GPU component, the CPU could use up to 65 watts by itself. The GPU can go up to 35 watts. So you're looking at something that's close to needing 100 watts to effectively hit all of its max cores. So all 8 CPU cores at 4.3 gigahertz, the GPU going at 2.7 gigahertz, pushing all of those all-core clocks would require around 100 watts. Now, that doesn't mean you'd get that performance out of there because we are memory constrained, right? We only have that 128-bit wide 7500 megatransfers RAM feeding the GPU and the CPU. So we're going to have diminishing returns right around the 18 to 20 watt mark anyway. 28 watt is where you're really going to start being at the maximum amount of power that you're going to be going at regardless. So that's just something that I wanted to quickly just identify here, right? So that's number one. Number two is that you have to remember that the Windows OS power schema and a lot of legacy operating systems, when we were targeting performance modes in any type of scope, it was always going towards the CPU, which means that both in the performance and the balance mode, they are pushing more power. If there was a lever that says, okay, I have 25 watts coming in, I need to push power to CPU, GPU, and Encore. For the moment, let's just talk about CPU and GPU. But if performance is saying push all the power to the CPU, remember, the CPU can use up to 65 watts, no problem. So if we're just pushing power into the CPU, it'll use it. It'll use it, but it won't do anything more for us for performance. So when you go into a efficiency state, that's saying use less power on the CPU, but it doesn't dictate anything for the GPU. Thus, you are giving more power to the GPU to do more work. So even in this very CPU-bound situation, what we do with efficiency is we actually wind up having a better overall situation where we're feeding the entire APU better overall as opposed to putting in performance or balance modes. So you always should be putting on an efficiency mode. We always should be trying to pull back from the CPU, giving it either putting on a CPU cap, a limit, taking off turbo modes, because the Zen 4 CPUs are already outrageously performant. So you want to limit how much that's going there. Now I want to just take this to the next step, right? We talked about all the OS power schemas. Since we know that the efficiency for Windows OS power mode is the best, what happens when we take it off of the balanced TDP cap and we can go to performance? And now we're going to be able to go up to 25 and 30 watt. So when we take a look at that, we look at the next chart, and you can see this is the orange line in there. So once we start pushing the orange line in there, then you can see that we are effectively making use of that wattage. Before, the graph that you saw, even though I had the charts going up to 28 watt, effectively it was always going to 20 watts. So we were just flatlined there. But if you put on the performance TDP scope, thermal scope on the Legion Space app, you will then be able to start using more power on the APU itself and thus getting better performance. So now we're in like at 220 FPS. This looks pretty good for a 7840U and a Z1E with this particular settings. So let's go ahead and just take a very brief look at what the Asus ROG Ally looks like in this same test. So this is just the Legion Go with efficiency power schema, but the performance TDP space scope in the Legion Space application itself versus the Asus ROG Ally. Now the Asus ROG Ally I've already tuned up. So we have made sure that core isolation is off, VMP is off, EPP is at 60, we're using power saver mode, we're already doing all the efficiency stuff. And when we look at this, you can see that the Asus ROG Ally with my performance settings that I've already done, this is outside of the default settings that the Legion Go is. So we're looking at pretty much default Legion Go versus a tuned up Asus ROG Ally by me. So you can see that the Asus ROG Ally actually does really well in the, I want to say 11 to 20 watt TDP scope. From 11 to 20 watt. In this CPU bound test, the Asus ROG Ally is doing better. This may largely be because of my tuned up settings, because I'm actually catering towards CPU power and GPU power a bit more than what the defaults are for the Legion Go. So once I'll be able to tweak that and see how far I can push the Legion Go in a follow-up video, we'll look at that later. But as we start going, pushing a little bit more, we actually see that most likely the 7500 mega transfer RAM is actually starting to pull ahead. So this is where we're starting to see the Legion Go win at those higher TDPs. So that's a very brief look at performance between all the different modes on the Legion Go in a CPU-bound synthetic benchmark. Again, I'm going to have another video that is going to go far more in-depth with a lot more additional game benches. We're also going to do a GPU-bound full wattage range, so from 5 watt to 30 watt, but in a GPU-bound scenario on Heaven, and get an idea of what that looks like so that we can start comparing to other platforms as well and have a better idea on a CPU-bound end and a GPU-bound end and how that system operates, along with a bunch of different games in 10, 15, 20, and 25 watt TDP benches, so we have a full understanding of how these machines operate, especially when we're trying to save on battery. Now that that quick look at performance is done, let's go ahead and talk about why the portrait-based screen isn't great. Now, a lot of people, they get kind of carried away, like, well, only old games are affected by this. That's not true. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a game that has been notorious, and a lot of people that have been in the handheld space know about this for a while, that if you run Red Dead Redemption 2 with the Vulkan API backend and you try to run full screen, it's actually only going to be in a little small quadrant over here. You can fix this with other tools, but it is very, very annoying, and that is a problem with portrait-based screens. Now, you can get around this easily by just using DirectX 12, but anyone that's having this issue, it makes the user experience really bad, and if it was just a native landscape panel, this wouldn't happen at all. There's lots of other things that happen across there as well, so I'm going to bring that up in this particular section right now, so let's get into that. So let's say you're getting this, and especially, you have the FPS mode, you have a trackpad here, but you can also convert the right Joy-Con into a mouse, and the left Joy-Con can be the WASD keys, or whatever keys you want them to be, to play older PC games with no problem. So you're going to go and say, I've been wanting to play Aliens vs. Predator Classic. So you're going to go there, you're going to press the play button, and then you're going to get hit in your face with D3D initialization failure. And the reason we're getting that is because of the portrait-based panel. If you wanted to play this game on the Asus ROG Ally, it would just run. But there's also some other stuff. So like there's Arx Fatalist. This is also a great game. You're going to try to play it, and then it's going to try to load, and kabam, what you're going to get is bad display mode because of the portrait-based panel. So it's going to try to run it in a software renderer solution. So right now, the GPU is not doing anything. The CPU is what is going to render everything on the screen. And it may seem like it's just going to go along, and you're like, all right, you know what? I can't have full screen, but that's okay. I'll just play like this,
and I'll just let my powerful CPUs handle everything. So as this is loading, let's go ahead and jump ahead and see what you see. All right, and so as you can hear, the game is loaded, but it isn't doing anything. And you'll get brief flickers on the screen of stuff rendering. But for all intents and purposes, this is super broken unless we go ahead and try to wrap this DirectX 7 game into something newer. Typically, these wrappers are going to be doing OpenGL, which isn't very good on AMD as it is, although AMD has newer OpenGL drivers that are better. But you can see how broken this is. This is just not going to work. It's slow and broken. So let's go ahead and take a look at some other games. Other games like Carmageddon 2, you're like, oh, sick, I want to play Carmageddon 2 again. I got a nice PC Gaming Handheld. You go ahead and press play. It just crashes and gives you no error whatsoever. It just says play again. So from your perspective, you don't know what happened. This is another game. This is a DirectX game, and this is a special type of broken that works with the... So you can see down here, this is the, like... helper task menu. This allows you to, the Asus RG Ally has this as well. This allows you to flick up from the bottom of the screen, even if it's full screen mode. Typically, it's not actually full screen exclusive. It's something else. But with Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver 2, this DirectX 8 game, effectively, there is another screen that's on top of everything else, and then all of your inputs no longer work. And I'll show you that in a second. So we're going to go to SimCity 4. This is another good game, especially with the mouse mode on the right Joy-Con. And you're going to go ahead and say, you know what, I want to play some SimCity 4 Deluxe. Oh, too bad, it doesn't work at all. Let's go to Legacy of Kain and see how broken things could possibly get. So now you're going to click play. All right, so it's loaded for a bit. Nothing's happened. It didn't stop. It just says cancel. But you can already see that I can't touch anything. So if I swipe up here, okay, I can get to the taskbar, but if I go here and I click on Soul Reaver, I can hear it running in the background, but nothing's actually displaying. So I go over here and I'll say, you know what, okay, I can't touch anything. How about I open up Task Manager? I'll just close it. Nope, I can't touch anything here. Nothing works. Even if I were to try to bring up the mouse doesn't work. So there is a special... This is really super broken at the moment. This just doesn't work. So the only way that you could effectively get out of this is to go to your user and sign out. So you'll close everything and then get an error. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to basically get out of that particular situation.
Again, I'm going to do a separate video on why native portrait panels are bad for Windows PC Gaming Handheld and why we should really be striving to go to landscape only. GPD had tried fixing it on the GPD Win 4 initially. That had some setbacks because of a stale frame that got put in there. GPD did wind up fixing that later on. And then on the GPD Win 4 7040U version, that was all fixed. So there are only a few actual native landscape PC gaming handhelds that exist. You have the GPD Win Max 2, the GPD Win 4, which actually is converting a portrait panel, but it's still overall still fine at this point. You have the Asus ROG Ally, and that's it. So there aren't a wide range of native landscape handhelds. In fact, only the Win Max 2 and Asus ROG technically qualify, and only the Asus ROG Ally has a VRR EDP panel. Most everything else is MIPI based. So that's a quick understanding of that. I want to start going in and talking about all the other parts of the controls and everything on here, like the hull-based analog sticks and how the Joy-Cons work. And overall, I'm pretty pleased with it, so let's go ahead and get into it.
Let's briefly talk about the software that is available on the Lenovo Legion Go. So this is called Legion Space, and I'm going to tap down here just so this goes away because I need to be able to access that button in a second. I thought I would just be able to bring it up just by pressing the button, but that doesn't work. Instead, you can actually press this button over here to bring up the Legion Space button, but it actually cycles between like a Steam-like quick access menu and also that button over there, which is super weird, and a lot of people have already brought it up. Now the taskbar is here blocking my menu button, so I can't even get to it easily. Let's go over what's available on the main screen up here. Very briefly, you have your battery icon, your Wi-Fi, and letting you know what type of mode you're in. Up here is a pretty straightforward gallery of what's going on and a recommended of what they have. The platform gaming, this allows you to quickly and easily download a launcher to install it, and everything is handled via here. Xbox is already installed. Steam I installed through here and everything worked just fine. If you were to go to library, this only shows games that you've already played. It doesn't show games that are installed. So this is one thing that the Asus RG Ally does, in that it scans your library and knows what's going on. Over here is Android Game, and this is basically just leveraging Amazon's own app store through the WinStore, so that is how you would get to there. So they're leveraging a lot of different things that are already available in the PC gaming landscape without actually doing anything themselves. Down here, this is something that's a little bit more unusual. The Asus RG Ally does this as well, but they bring this into a bit more front and center. So this will jump over to third-party stores. You'll get a little notification that it's a third-party store that you're going to go to, and this is where they will actually make a bit of money. So there will be affiliate links effectively for all of these games that you're looking at and wherever you're going to buy them on. So they're going to be making money from that angle instead of buying from Steam directly. So that's pretty much the front end of the front end. Let's go ahead and look at the menu really quick, because there's some interesting design choices. Pressing this will get you back to the desktop. This is your recently played. This is the home screen, so that'll just bring up this again. If we go back to menu, you can take a look at what is downloaded. This is going to show you anything that Legion Space is going to download itself. Go back to menu. Here you have screenshots, where it's going to look at your screenshot folder. And more importantly, here is your settings folder. If we jump down here, this is the performance menu, and this is something that I've already talked about earlier on. And again, I do recommend the OS power mode being efficiency and thermal mode being performance. With these two settings, at least so far using the default settings and doing no more, that will give you the best performance at every wattage. So if you're running at 10 watt, it's going to give you the best performance there. If you run at 25 watt, it's going to give you the best performance there. So this is what I would recommend. Leave RSR off. If you wanted to look at other better settings, that is going to be something that I'm going to be taking a look at later on in my full review video. This is more of a quick look. In the display section, this is where you'll be able to quickly change between resolutions. So they offer 800p, 1200p, and 1600p, all 16:10 aspect ratios, and display refresh rate is 144 Hz or 60 Hz. This is depending on what you want to do. There is no VRR. Again, this is a portrait-based display, most likely MIPI-based, not EDP, so we wouldn't even be able to make use of VRR anyway, because VRR is only on the EDP standard and not on MIPI. MIPI has its own and isn't as full-featured as VRR is. For vibration, this is where you're going to be setting how the vibrators feel on the Joy-Cons themselves. This is again something we're going to be looking at more in the full review. In controller mode, you can see that we are on gamepad. Now, this is something that I wish that they did a little bit more in here. For the gamepad mapping, you can do gyro, and gyro will act as left stick or a right stick. So this is going to be something that's on here, which is nice. And this is something that the Asus RG Ally does not support just yet. You have to use third-party tools to use it. If we take a look at these other buttons that are on the back buttons of the Joy-Cons themselves, we actually have a limited amount of buttons that are here. You can only effectively make these back buttons over here more Xbox buttons, which is not very, very useful. The nice thing here is that this button mapping profile changes based on the mode. So if we take these Joy-Cons out and go to FPS mode, which we'll look in a moment, you can actually change it to a whole swath of different keyboard keys, which is really nice to see. Here you're going to get the lighting effects, and that's what we will set that. This space is just a quick look at your disk space, and then it's your screenshot folder as well as the download folder. So that's pretty much it for the Legion Space settings themselves. The thing that's weird with the Legion Space app itself is that this is like the quick access menu on the Steam Deck, and it brings up the menu of the Legion Space first, which is super weird, and you press it again, and then it gives you this quick access menu, which is far preferable and looks very similar to what the Steam Deck has already did with SteamOS and their quick access menu. From here, you can quickly just go to any particular setting you want, do lighting effects. This is something that I like that they've done because it's simple and effective. For here, you can actually very quickly just go up to the frame monitor. If you press all, you'll be able to see your statistics really quickly, and that's built in, nothing for you to do. Thermal mode for performance and OS power for efficiency. That is what I found to be initially the best performance, at least so far, from a CPU stress test, a CPU-bound gaming stress test. We'll look at that more as my full review comes out. And then we have productivity mode, so you can set external display as primary. This is type of stuff that is kind of simple to set up on Windows itself, but they provide it in here as well. And that's pretty much the Lenovo Legion Space application itself with all of its quirks, and it's a bit half-baked at the moment. I would like this button to just bring up the quick access menu instead of toggling between the four of them, which is just super weird. And the Legion Space app itself, I wish was a little bit more fleshed out than where it is now. However, that being said, the Legion Space app works as it should, and insofar as what we need to know for like the battery and everything. So if we bring these up, you do get a quick look at the battery controller status of the Joy-Cons as well, which is really nice to see, and it's very full-featured in that respect. So the other part of the Legion Space app is that these Joy-Cons can actually operate as something else. So we're going to go ahead and close this, but we're going to go ahead and enable what they call FPS modes. We're going to go ahead and engage this, and you get a little tooltip on screen that FPS mode is engaged. There's also a little magnetized puck here that will engage this. Okay, and then you can effectively use this as a mouse of sorts. I would recommend taking a look at this because in the Legion Space app itself, we can actually see some different settings. So we now have mouse DPI settings, so you can change this to whatever you want. This is going to be whatever you kind of want as your preference, so give that a look before you go ahead and do anything. Now you can see in button remapping tool, we have the FPS default. They have different settings, but let's go ahead and just take a look at what's available to you. So what's cool here, if we take a look here, you can actually see that this is already labeled as WASD, so WASD. That's actually really nice to default to that. So this makes it so that you could just play a game, and it's pretty simple for most FPS, where you're going to be using this and moving around, and it feels very, very natural. But if you wanted to go ahead and make any other button whatever you wanted to, so if you wanted this to be something else, you can make it whatever you want. So you have the mouse, keyboard, and numpad. So this I wish was built into the Xbox app, the Xbox gamepad side itself, but this is the last part of the Legion Space app, and I actually like the amount of customizations that they have for the mouse mode more so than the Xbox mode. All right, let's take a brief look at the controls that are on the Lenovo Legion Go. For what it's worth, these analog sticks I actually like. This is my preference, okay? This has always been my preference, and if you've been following my channel for a while, you always know I've always liked this. Concave is better than convex, so that there's a nice place for your thumb to sit into, and this ridged material that they have around here feels really nice. It's just really, really excellent. Additionally, these analog sticks are hole-based analog sticks, and more to the point, they even feature the same type of circularity that other hole-based handhelds have. So if we'll go ahead and click on this, you're going to see that we have very little average error when it comes to making a complete circle. For all intents and purposes, this is fine. I do prefer to go outside of this circle, but if you are a big circle man, then these are going to, by default, work as you hope they would. When we take a look at this D-pad I'm not a big fan of. It's super flat and instantly clicks down. The amount of travel to click down, so let's see, like there it is on pressed. How little travel this D-pad has. So they are dome-based D-pads instead of membrane-based, which I prefer. I always like dome-based as opposed to membrane-based, but that's just my preference, not that it's right or wrong. Now, the short travel and the very square-ish D-pad itself, I mean, how it feels, I'm really not the biggest fan, although in terms of input, I don't have any semblance of missed input here. And even when we're doing like half circles, you can see that the motion is fine. It's just that I don't really like it all that much. I don't like using it. It's perfectly fine for a D-pad where you just need to select any particular quadrant real quick. So for a game that is analog dominant and you need to just select a previous weapon or just quickly select a hotkey or something, that's totally fine. That is perfect. But actually using the D-pad for D-pad purposes, I'm not the biggest fan of it. Second up, I'm not a fan of them prioritizing their Legion Space buttons right where it's most comfortable for select and start. I would have much preferred select and start right here. And if they found just some other place to put their Legion Space buttons, because as it is, pressing these start and select buttons are an annoyance. I don't know. Even if start and select were just right here on the left side and they just had both of these buttons over here, technically, I think that the Legion Space button and the quick access menu could have just been one button, especially how they have it currently configured. There really isn't much of a reason to have this giant splash page come in front of your face when you can effectively get the same thing by doing that with one button. So this setup is kind of superfluous. I don't know where they're going to go with that. It's not something that I'm a big fan of. When we talk about the back keys, I think it's going to be better if we go ahead and take these Joy-Cons out. And there's a segment in this video where I talk about this, so I'll talk about that a little bit more in length. On the back, we have a nice kickstand, which is really nice to see on this type of device, especially if someone wanted to use this device as a tablet PC, where bringing in a Bluetooth keyboard into the mix and kind of leaving these on the side. With FPS mode, this is something that's a little weird for me, right? Because I like that the Joy-Cons are always attached, which means that the mouse mode that you'd be disconnecting from here would also always be attached. However, not everyone is going to be carrying this little puck around. It is magnetized, so that is nice to see. However, getting it into this mode, I'm not the biggest fan of it. So you can see that we switched to FPS mode, and you kind of hold it like this. So mouse 1, mouse 2, and then to get to the scroll wheel, you have to use your thumb, which isn't great because you kind of have to disengage how you're going to be using it. So you wouldn't be able to make use of the mouse scroll wheel like you would with a normal mouse in gaming. However, again, I already touched base on this in the Legion Space part of this. This becomes WAS, and you can kind of do all the hotkeys. You can see how that looks in the Legion Space part of this review. But having all the different buttons and everything, I'm glad that this function exists. I just don't really think that it's very practical. While it is a neat idea, I think that they need to find a way to make this built into the Joy-Con, because no one's going to be carrying that around. Or at least I don't think people are going to be carrying that around. Or maybe they're going to be using the case and always having this on the bottom. It just seems like a big to-do to get into this particular mode. So for me, this doesn't make much sense for me. For the analog triggers themselves, actually, I'm a big fan of them and how they actually fit in the hand. And when we talk about just using them as Joy-Cons themselves and how everything kind of just rests on your hands, all told, this is actually far more comfortable than Joy-Cons feel in the hand when they're separated as is. So I actually think that this is a bit of a plus. Also, these analog triggers are really nice, and how they feel, how my fingers want to land, is exactly where I think they should be. So big plus for the analog sticks and triggers. If you were a type of person that mostly cared about analog triggers and analog sticks, the Lenovo Legion Go is actually really good. All right, briefly, I just want to show how these Joy-Cons come out. So there actually is a little toggle here, and this will bring in the clips a little bit. So what you want to do is you want to press in here and then push down to get these out. If we can get a close look at this, you can actually see the little... So there's that Joy-Con rail. And you can see how little action there is from pushing this little button down here. And that helps you just push it down to get it out. So if you want to just do it to both controllers, it's not the best action in the world. I'm not a big fan of it. So you want to press that down and go down with it. And then even pushing it back in feels a bit odd to me. I'm not the biggest fan of it. It doesn't really, it's not Joy-Con satisfaction of putting it back in. You know what I mean? It's kind of weird. So it's also weird for me to do it through a viewfinder. So that's how it pretty much goes in. And then, yeah, kind of just clip it back up. Okay, and then, okay. You can hear a little clip, but it's a bit weird, and I'm not a big fan of it. All right, so here is Doom Eternal, and you can see that I'm running 800p, but I'm also using the Ultra preset, so a pretty high GPU preset to be using. You can see that we're getting around 120 FPS over here. And this is to be expected because Doom Eternal is a fantastically optimized game. All right, so here we are in mouse mode, and I am not used to having a vertical mouse whatsoever. What are my buttons? Okay, that's jump. Okay, that's zoom in. Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's okay. I'm like strafing into shots. Not sure I know how to use a vertical mouse. How do I switch? Ugh. Don't know any button. How do I jump? So this is something, this is fairly well understood, and this makes sense to me now, but some of the buttons I'm still not really sure where they are. And then the scroll wheel over here. This is something that it's going to take used to, although maybe it's because I'm playing through a viewfinder. Not the biggest fan of this setup. Alright, so here is Returnal. This game is absolutely brutal on GPUs. It will hammer GPUs. This game gets murdicated on the Steam Deck, and it's also getting beat up pretty bad here. We are running at 800p, low settings, and I am using FSR performance, so we're actually using a lower resolution than 800p, and then upscaling to 800p, which then upscales again. I had to boost out the brightness on the display just because the game is rather dark to even get picked up on my camera, so that is why this is getting a little bit blown out. But a nice thing that you can see here, which is excellent, if you take a look at VRAM, you can see right there 937 megahertz. That is the LPDDR5X 7500 megatransfers. If it was 6400 megatransfers like the Asus ROG Ally is, it would be 800 megahertz, but we are indeed running at 937 megahertz. So we're going to be able to get that extra boost from RAM to go to the GPU and be able to feed it when we start pushing more TDP, which is nice to see. And this is a game that is going to love getting that extra juice. So one of the things that I wanted to test here is switching off the controls. Now, one of the nice things about the Switch is that you can take the controls off. Not such a nice manner. Ugh. All right. So controls are off, and let's see if... Hey, look at that. Nothing needed. Just worked. Very cool. So one of the things that is kind of neat here to think about is that you could technically use this. Now, one of the things that I've always done with the Switch myself is go on a treadmill and put the Switch tablet on the top part of the ledge of the treadmill and then just walk with the Joy-Cons in my hands. So this is pretty much the only PC gaming handheld where it is going to be as seamless as that, even though taking off the Joy-Con parts of it are not so, what's the word I'm looking for? Graceful. It's not very graceful to take these Joy-Cons off. They're kind of like tanks getting on and off. I'm actually a big fan of this. So one other thing that's worth mentioning with the Lenovo Legion Go is obviously its ability to be a tablet itself. So if you wanted to bring a Bluetooth keyboard with you and type up, you can do that as well. The other thing that's, useful for this type of form factor is that if we were to go ahead, I already have rotation lock on. You can actually see it right there. So I'm going to go ahead and disable rotation lock. And if we were to go to, like, say, I'm not going to go there. So say you wanted to go to like websites or anything you want to read, you can just go ahead and put it in tablet mode and then just use it as your tablet. So this is one of the other benefits of the Lenovo Legion Go is its multi-purpose type of nature. And the display, for what it's worth, is absolutely fantastic.
Again, as a recap, hole-based analog sticks, a big plus. The D-pad is fine for a dome base, but it's okay. Some of the button placement is a bit weird. The face buttons are fine. The touchpad that's over here, I'm glad that there's an inclusion for that. That's always nice to just have as an additional part there. Having the FPS mode on the Joy-Cons, but also having the Joy-Cons actually just automatically connect, giving you all the battery information through the Legion Space app. All of that works well enough and seamless enough that I'm very happy with the solution that Lenovo has right now. However, where Lenovo is with Legion Space right now is really rocky. This is a rough start to a launch. They need to do a lot to fix this up. There's a bunch that they need to fix here that I've already addressed in the Legion Space part of this video. So that's it for my quick look for this particular video. Again, I'm going to have another video where we're talking about just the problems of native portrait-based panels. That'll be a separate video detailing everything there. And then there's going to be a separate video as well where we're just doing reviews. Might do the reviews video first. But that's it for me. Hopefully this video is informative, guys. As always, thank you for your time. And thanks for watching.